Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
Welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast, your go-to resource for hidden growth opportunities throughout online business. For those familiar or new to the podcast, I'm your host, Sarah Nuttycombe. In this episode, we have Ronnie Teja, founder of Branzio Watches and an owner of a portfolio of e-commerce businesses. Ronnie comes with such an interesting background story. He immigrated to Canada in his early 20s and had to start from scratch to get established in a new country. He went from picking blueberries to selling door-to-door radios to teaching himself digital marketing and eventually making his way into e-commerce. Despite initial challenges when he launched his first e-commerce brand, his business is still going strong 6 years later. Ronnie goes over every detail of his journey, taking his first business and turning it into so much more. He talks about the team structures it takes to make a successful e-commerce venture work and where he thinks the best opportunities to scale an e-commerce business are today. I don't want to give away too much just yet, so let's dig into the interview and see what Ronnie has to share. And then stay tuned at the end of the episode where I'll provide some extra insight by answering some common questions online business builders have. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast. We are looking forward to having today's guest on, Ronnie Teja. Ronnie, thanks so much for joining us for the show today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great. So we talked about it a little bit offline, but we'll go over it anyway. Where are you calling from in the world right now?
I'm in Vancouver. I'm back home after a brief period of COVID in Bangkok.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So you've probably been landlocked in Bangkok for a while because of the pandemic, correct?
Yes, for about a year and a half. The idea was to move to Bangkok so I could actually use it as a base to fly to China so I could see my suppliers, but I guess that didn't really pan out as I'd expected.
So you had moved just at the beginning of the pandemic and that happened?
Yeah, I moved in October of 2019 and then the pandemic hit and, Thailand closed all the flights in March. So I really didn't get to enjoy much, about the reason why I actually moved to Bangkok. But Bangkok itself is a pretty fun city. I mean, when most of the world was, in phase 1 and phase 2 of the lockdown, Bangkok was pretty safe bet to be in. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. We watched a lot of the colleagues in Southeast Asia at Empire Flippers live completely different lives than what I was living when I was very much locked down in the EU during COVID. And then, colleagues in Vietnam were just like living completely normal. And then now roles have been reversed where obviously Southeast Asia has been a little bit more locked down. They're just rolling out vaccines. They're starting to experience lockdown kind of for the first time. And then obviously the rest of the world's in a different point. So it's been really interesting having an international company. And I'm sure you see that with your businesses, right? Everybody's kind of going through something different at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, for us, in e-commerce, at least it's been more of a boom and people are getting used to purchasing more and more online. But of course, it depends on the journey and how it ends up. I mean, people were quite unsure of what the pandemic is. I mean, nobody could have predicted in our lifetimes that something like this would have happened, right? I mean, It's a good time to be in e-commerce, but it's not a good time to be in a bricks and mortar business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess that relates to why you're here. So let's kick things off, talk a little bit more about your journey. And, for those who don't know you, walk me through what has your entrepreneurial journey looked like and, what's it look like today?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a first generation immigrant to Canada. So my family and myself, we moved in about 2008 from India. I'd moved from London because I was doing my master's there and landed in Vancouver, May the 14th. I'll never forget the day. And for the first couple of months when I was here, I was picking blueberries, believe it or not. And I'd never done manual labor in my life before. But the story is that, when you come on as an immigrant or if you've ever sort of had that experience, we had to make rent, we had to pay bills, et cetera, and we were staying in somebody's basement for about $500 a month. So it was a family of 4 staying in somebody's basement. I was waking up at 4:35 a.m. going to pick blueberries, et cetera, because nobody wanted to give me a job. And they said, oh, your experience is from India, or your experience is from London, and we don't really recognize it here. To Vancouver's credit, it's changed quite a lot since then. But, back then it was basically like people who were like, okay, I don't blame them. People could basically be lying on the resume and then people might have been bitten because of it. From there on out, moved to HSBC, taught myself digital marketing, took some courses on it. I was selling door-to-door radio for a bit in the journey in between. But I said, look, this is not really something for me long-term. So, moved from there, went to HSBC as the digital marketing manager for retail banking of Canada. Realized banking is not where I want to be in the long run. It's not really something that is enticing. And, I really don't want to be selling mortgages to people and planning campaigns that are 6 months in advance. Got a break, moved to Best Buy, which was phenomenal because Best Buy taught me anything and everything about e-commerce and fast-paced marketing and everything else, which was like, wow. We'd have tomorrow the Samsung Galaxy launch at 3 a.m. PST. So I have to get a campaign out the night before 10 p.m. PST, just making sure that these campaigns on Facebook and Google and everything else, and there's a collaboration of Best Buy leading to a pre-sales page, leading them to the sale price and driving into in-store, whatever the objective of the campaign was, to be able to get these done. So it taught me the exact opposite of what HSBC, my experience at HSBC was. Everything's fast, it's going to come quickly, you don't know where things are going to end up, and you better be prepared. You best be prepared for what's coming down the pipeline. So yeah, it was a fantastic experience. And then from there on, I went to work for an ad agency in Australia. And then at the end of it, I was like, hey, you know what? I'm kind of sick of making money for other people. And I said, I owe myself a chance to change my life and to say, look, why do I do this? I'm young enough. In entrepreneurial terms, I was pretty old. I was 30 years old, not a young, rambunctious kid, 22, 23. But, I said, I'll take a chance on myself and see how it goes. And, started Branzio Watches on January the 1st, 2015. And, here we are 6 years later.
Wow, that's an incredible story. I like that you basically were just saying there, you deserve to give yourself a chance. I feel like a lot of people don't realize that very valuable life lesson and kind of take bets on themselves the way you did. And I love that, you obviously had quite a few challenges leading up to taking that chance on yourself. But like you said, it's worked. Here you are with an established e-commerce business still going many years later. I'm curious, after all the ups and downs in your journey, what was your driving force to stick to your own business and just kind of stick with it no matter what obstacles?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about the obstacles, right? I think I'd seen everything and anything in the first 6 months since I'd started my business. So it was like in the first few months when I'd started my business, we had a logo, we had everything up and running. And then basically 2 months in, I see a Kickstarter campaign of somebody from Vancouver whom I don't even know. Turns out they've got the same damn logo, same damn design as my watches. And you basically go like, holy hell, I've been preparing for this launch for like 2.5, 3 months. And this is what comes on the pipeline. So yeah, I'm used to everything. Then we had shipping issues, then we had design issues, then we had mold issues. So imagine everything that could go wrong went wrong within the first 3 months of me launching my business, which was fantastic because it was all front loaded. And at that point in time, my stress levels were so high. I think I was getting maybe like 3-4 hours of sleep a night. What it taught me were the values of perseverance, of being strong-willed and everything else. My father was in the army. He was in the army for 35 years and he wanted me to not start a business. He wanted me to go and work at a bank or work at Best Buy and say, look, you've got a pension plan here, stick with your pension plan, stick here for the next 20 years, etc., etc. And I was like, you know what, this isn't for me. And something that sort of accelerated that whole process was, my former boss at Best Buy, he'd been with the company for, I think, about 18, 19 years. And one fine day, they just let him go because, the executives didn't make their bonus. And I said, look, he's given 20 years of his life to a company like that. And at the end of the year, if this is the way he's going to be treated, then, why should I be sticking around in a company like that? So I kind of enjoyed taking that chance on myself. And I said, once you're in it, you're in with both feet, there's no turning back. And that was something that that kept me going.
Oh, that's awesome. It's such a great example. I like that you just shared that there, where it's like you were given one piece of advice to go to the safe route. And then all of a sudden you saw somebody doing the quote unquote safe route and watched it unfurl in a way that it turned out it wasn't actually safe. Someone dedicated their life to a company. Lo and behold, it didn't exactly work out for that person. So it seems like it was kind of an invitation to go, you know what, it does seem a little bit scary to strike out on my own and go against maybe my dad's will here, but I think I deserve that shot and I'm going to make it work. What's interesting to me, and I don't think you quite mentioned this in the beginning, I know you were talking about like the years that you first immigrated and when you started your business, but I think just reading up a little bit about you before we chatted, it's like you immigrated in your early 20s. I found that to be so interesting because I don't meet many people who started their immigration journey in that point in their life. Was there something about that you feel like really set you up to sort of kind of be successful going into this eventual and long journey into entrepreneurship?
Well, first and foremost, I got to be grateful to my mom. That thing about your mom always knows best is always a good idea to follow. So my mom actually had applied for us to immigrate as a family to Canada. And, I like to call it the golden ticket. So we got the golden ticket and we all moved together as a family to Canada. And so if I would have stayed in India, right? And India, to its credit, is a great place and it's an awesome place to grow up. However, if I would have wanted to grow as a person, take the route as an entrepreneur, do something else, I don't think so that would have happened. I don't think so that would have happened in India because, it's very regimented. You're not encouraged as much to take chances on yourself. At least back then. Now it's a different story. However, I would say that, it's changed quite a lot. Let's say 13, 14 years ago, I would have basically been going to an office and doing my job from 9 to 5. And, Canada was the land that gave me that opportunity. I've been through the whole shebang, like I said, working in a blueberry field, working in all these different places. And I think that opportunity has presented itself and it's been quite an interesting journey.
Yeah, no, it definitely seems like it teed you up to kind of be like a fully ready entrepreneur with enough experiences behind yourself that you can't always account to how maybe picking blueberries will help you as an entrepreneur down the road, but then somehow it shows up. I guess it kind of reminds me of, I know there's a good film on that where it's like all the life experiences helped. I think it's Slumdog Millionaire where the guy ends up winning the competition based off of all of his life experiences that helped him answer every question. I feel like sometimes life is a little bit like that, right? Where we have no idea how things come together and all of a sudden it's it's showing up in the moment that you need it. And they're in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea is, you never give that up. You just got to put your head down and, it's like you don't have a way to turn back. You can't turn back because it's almost a, societal pressure, especially in Indian families and Asian families in general. And it was that thing which is I am going to do this with or without my parents' help or anything else. I was going to do it no matter what.
Oh, I love that. So it kind of tees me up for my next question here. I wanted to ask about that secret sauce for scaling your first business, because you hinted to this before. You went through obviously so many personal obstacles, but then when you went to launch, it seemed to be one thing after the other. You weren't sleeping. Everything was going awry. So obviously you got through that point in time. What was the turning point that allowed you to start to scale successfully?
First of all, when you become an entrepreneur, what nobody tells you is the amount of grief you go through initially. And by grief, I mean essentially you are the customer service person, you are the media buyer, you are the sourcer. I was wearing, and everybody, so I had 7 different hats that I was wearing. Of course, coupled with that, no sleep, no gym, no exercise because you're completely glued to your laptop and everything else. It does, it definitely affects the whole game. And I was glad I had a buddy from a university days who was an entrepreneur and he was about 6 or 7 years into his entrepreneurship. So he actually helped me out. He had done the whole 4-hour work week. He had a remote team, et cetera, et cetera. And, looking outside for help or asking for help from people outside of your comfort zone is not a bad thing at the end of the day. To this day, I'll say leave your ego at the door. And if you're able to leave your ego at the door, you'll be surprised to find out how much people would actually be able to help you out, or you can learn from other people's experiences. So quite grateful in that regard and quite lucky to have such good and close friends. But what helped me scale, I would say, is, a couple of things. Number one was after I told you about, the watch story, which was basically somebody had a logo, somebody had the same design, et cetera, et cetera. However, we never had met these people. I found a good supplier and the supplier was able to extend to me credit terms. So on the first round of watches we did, I only had to give a 20% down payment. And they actually extended me a 60-day line of credit. So that gave me enough ammo or money to actually go back and invest a whole lot of money into Facebook ads and Instagram ads because it was 2015. It was still a nascent stage. However, CPMs were quite cheap. So something that was, the cost of acquisition or cost per acquisition for the product was between $14 to $18, right? Today that story has changed. It's 3 times that. Back then, having the leeway to be able to do all this was a big thing for me. And, I would have to say support of friends, support of suppliers helped me succeed in that.
Yeah, it's good. It sounds like you got in at a time where at least there was that cost benefit. There's something quite special about getting into the game a little bit earlier than everyone else. And it had its challenges, but obviously had its benefits and allowed you to start a solid brand early on. I guess to put time and place in perspective, we've talked a bit about your one leading brand, but my understanding is that you own several businesses. So can you walk me through what your, say, portfolio looks like? And when did you know it was the right time to branch out from one business to owning more?
There's a few things there, right? So the businesses that we own, they're all related to each other, right? In some cases, they are different where we said, okay, it's a good idea to acquire a business, et cetera, et cetera. However, most of the businesses that we first started acquiring were all correlated to each other. And we said, look, we have a team here. This team is quite well. So say, for example, it's like an agency model, right? You have this agency, you have a media buyer, you have a product sourcer, you have a logistics person, you have a good customer service team. We made sure that this team was good. And to be honest, I didn't have a good team, or I didn't have like what I was considered a highly functioning team till about 2 or 3 years ago, right? 2 or 3 years ago is when we actually hired an external person to come in, have a look at a team, implement EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, for those who are curious about it, and then say, okay, now within 6 months, we have a deadline to create a very highly functioning team. I can actually step away from the business and actually look at acquiring other businesses. And that's how the journey started. So now in the middle, what we have is a very highly functioning team. We take this team and we say, okay, we can wear different hats in this team. So you don't need to always be focused on watches. Is there a way you could be focused on bed sheets? I mean, dealing with the customer is the same. It's just the product has changed. So we hire for abilities or the capacity to be able to look at, wear a different thinking hat for different businesses. And that's what has helped us succeed in the long run as well.
Okay, cool. Well, I guess, we're talking about on the next idea of expansion. How have you approached, say the process of like buying businesses? Because obviously we have a lot of people who come to our marketplace to buy. It's always a really nice opportunity to have business buyers on to talk about where their mindset is. Walk me through what you're looking for and what did you find to have really worked for you in the process?
I think buying a business is all about due diligence, right? It's always about looking at, okay, so some people, for example, will say, okay, I only work 10 hours in the business. The thing is, they're a solo founder and owner, and basically the whole life has been the business. So they know the business like the back of the hand. So initially, when you say pick up and you actually have a chat with these guys, it might not be a 5-10 hour business. For you to actually learn the business, work on the business, it might be like a 20-25 hour work week, or if not more, right? So you're taking on a lot more than you actually imagined in retrospect. What I would caveat that is with saying that, is how long is this person who the founder is, how long are they going to stick around? So, for example, that's why you have payments set up in tranches, right? So that exactly you know how much this person is working, what is the exact ins and outs of the business. Some people would say, okay, yeah, this is how much we're working and this is what we want at the end of it. Having a tranche sort of a scenario is, of course, going to be beneficial to you as a buyer. So when I go and I actually look at these things. Another thing is like how dependent are these businesses on each platform? So for example, if you ever get like banned from Facebook, banned from Google, Amazon changes algorithm, Google changes algo, like how adversely is it going to affect the business? Personally speaking, I prefer businesses that, have a steady stream of income coming from Facebook, from Google, from Amazon. So you're hitting all the channels equally. So even if one channel goes down, it doesn't come to a scenario where, you're scrambling and firing people and everything else, or hoping that at the end of the day, you'll be able to get your money back, right? So that's another thing of the way I would look at things. Empire Flippers, in my opinion, does do its due diligence before they actually present these things to the buyers. So it's something that I would, trust Justin and Joseph and everybody else to maintain that particular professionalism that the team and the due diligence that you guys do, that's actually helped us out in the long run. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, glad to hear it. You said something earlier that, circling back to it, I'm thinking about it because we were actually just writing some content on the subject and, feel free to tell me if this isn't the right direction with this, but you were talking about like buying businesses in the same niche, at least sounds like in the same category. So what's your strategy there? Are you trying to realize, particular synergies? Are you bringing them together? Are you letting them operate separately? I don't know if this is secret information, but I'm just curious what your approach is on that front.
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple of things here that we look at, right? So we're looking at what is the business synergy of this whole scenario. Like, is there a way that the businesses can complement each other, right? Or the second scenario is like, how comfortable is the team fitting into this niche, right? So is there a way that the team that we have, can they fit into this niche? Will they be able to understand the product and quickly, cycle through between different things? If they can cycle through between different things, it's easy peasy, right? Then understanding a simple product could be like, if you work in watches, would you understand sunglasses? Hell yeah. So quite easy. Fashion, would you understand men's bracelets or men's jewelry? Yes, of course you can. Okay, great. Let's acquire that business. Whereas if you were selling watches and then all of a sudden you're selling software or a SaaS company or something, then that becomes a completely different ballgame. Or you're selling spiritual jewelry, that becomes a completely different ballgame. So you want some sort of similarities between businesses so you can actually take that and scale it pretty quickly. However, we do operate in different niches. that are complete opposites of everything. Like that's what I was saying, having the ability of the team to be able to understand products, or at least like that functionality of having a high performing team, is that they're able to look at these things from a very objective manner. So of course, when you acquire businesses, that period of training of 30 to 60 days, and everybody, including myself, will undergo that whole training process so we can understand it better, because we need to be better informed about what the product is about and everything else. Everyone from top down, HR, myself, customer service, etc., etc. If it's not done, then we won't be doing justice to the business. And that's where I would, look at this.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing your perspective on that. It sounds like you've got an interesting approach to leveraging the talents and experience of your team to be able to go out and acquire more opportunities within their skill sets and abilities, which is cool because obviously we talk to a lot of people who've got, let's say, full-fledged teams on the content side. And there's a lot about, I suppose, leveraging a team's talents for maybe being able to take on certain things within one particular business or a couple different businesses. But I don't always hear of it from the perspective of, I am using their talents to go after new acquisition opportunities. Like they help me be able to realize those opportunities and to bring them into the portfolio because they already know how to do this, at least mostly. If we have a slightly different product, no problem, like you said. So yeah, I find that interesting. I'm sure that's probably going to be thought-provoking for a lot of people with teams going, I could probably be leveraging my team in a much different facet than the way I am now working in the business. We could be looking at opportunities outside of the business because of the team.
Yeah, exactly. What that essentially would mean is like that shows that you're comfortable with the team, and comfortable in the sense you're confident in the abilities to be able to produce, right? So it's a central team with flying employees. So in some cases, we're busy in Q1 and Q3, and some companies we're busy in Q2 and Q4. So we're able to like juggle those people quite easily. And because we can juggle them, it's quite helpful for us, right? Just that ability to be able to juggle them and look at the workloads, because we have historic data in them, we're able to do that quite quickly and quite easily, which does suit the business long term in that sense.
Okay. On the point of talking about teams here, what does managing a portfolio of so many businesses with, a team, I think you have about 30 employees. What does that look like? What's the key to running so many businesses simultaneously with success?
Oh, well, I'd say success. You give me too much credit here. But what I would say is, it's being able to wear different hats, right? In the beginning, it's hiring capable managers to manage certain sites. So, for example, for the watch sites and anything related to watches, we, of course, have the right managers in place. And once those guys are in place, we just say, okay, we'll bonus you for X, Y, Z sort of performance. And, of course, they're driven to own the product, to run with the product, to be able to come up with the right ideas for the product. And once you, of course, have a proper bonus structure, proper bonus way that people are able to say, okay, you have ownership and you have a stake in this particular site or this particular portfolio, then all of a sudden what we've seen is the performance level increases, right? In some cases, it could be sweat equity, where we say, okay, look, we'll give you sweat equity in so business. You just have to put the time in and then see how it goes. So having that management checks and balances, number one. Of course, number two is like having your finances right from day one. I wasn't really good at it, to be honest. I learned that skill quite late in life. But it was just very rough manual stuff at the top of my head, how much money is coming in, how much money is going out. But having a proper reporting structure on a weekly basis with your finance guys, I think that takes you a long way.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a fair challenge, right? Getting those finances straight. I can't think of many entrepreneurs that really have that all like nailed down, especially in the early days. And I think, like you said, when you have so many businesses running at once, certainly getting that together isn't always easy, but, possible with a bit of work. One thing that, I kind of thought of is looking into what you do and the fact that you're running all these different e-commerce businesses is, I know you're operating on different platforms, right? Like Shopify, Magento, BigCommerce. To me, I was curious, what would be the key lessons you've learned managing businesses across all these different e-commerce platforms?
Ideally, what we want is we want everything to be centralized on one platform. But, we're lucky that we have the right developers and the right people in place that we're able to communicate the data or the shipping or the logistics via APIs from all the businesses into one central software that we have. So that's kind of like worked out for us, right, in that sense. But my learning with working on these different platforms is the fact that you need to be, if you don't have the right people in place, and I keep going back to the people aspect of it. And the reason why I say that is because my time on the business, like running the day-to-day of the business, is quite minimal. I don't know what an easy way of saying it is. Like, I don't work on the business as much as I used to. Most of my days, I actually spent focusing on families to grow the business or acquire the businesses. So I would say my actual time spent on working on the business on a weekly basis is between 10 to 20 hours for the whole portfolio, believe it or not. But actually looking for avenues to grow the business, I would say is another 20 to 30 hours. So, looking for out of the box ideas, looking for a businesses to acquire, doing due diligence calls, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, management team meetings on making sure that everything's running smoothly. So I don't know how to explain it. It's like the graduation from being like somebody who's down in the dirt, getting the hands dirty, to somebody today who is sort of working on the business and looking for long-term growth. It's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah, working on the business, not in the business, right?
Yeah.
Sounds like you found that balance. And again, you made that point to the team aspect, but it sounds like you've really seemed to kind of hit your stride, right? With all those people coming into play to the point where it's amazing that you can spend so much of your week actually looking and thinking about the strategy of this entirety of the operation that you have versus just being stuck in the nitty gritty.
Correct. And it's very easy to get stuck in the nitty gritty, right? I mean, I've done it. I never understood what people meant. What does it mean to work in the business or on the business? What I would say is at this juncture, and everybody says, oh, what does it mean? Blah, 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 blah. What I would say to you, which is quite simple, like anybody who's listening to the podcast, is you have to experience it. Because I've heard this, a lot of people talk about it, and I didn't know what it meant till the time I hired a consultant to actually take me through the whole process.
Okay. That's really cool. I mean, it's great that you got the expert in the room to actually help you and orient yourself on that. Because I think probably a lot of entrepreneurs probably suffer from a bit of blindness on that front, right? They think that they're moving the needle. They think they're moving direction of the business, but you almost need that outside approach to go, no, actually, you're still very much in the business. Like we need to reorient you, get you out of this, get the right team in the room for you to actually be moving the business the way you want it to. So that's pretty cool. I know that you operate within the fashion and accessories niche with a lot of your businesses. To me, I find that impressive because maybe this is just an outsider perspective, but I feel like that's quite a competitive space to be in. And it's not the easiest to break in and continue to be relevant. Obviously, trends change, tastes change. So what would you say it takes to stay relevant, competitive, and scale in the fashion and accessories niche?
Yeah, so that's quite interesting. I mean, look, with Facebook, it all comes down to a couple of things, right? These things are very visual. So it could be TikTok, it could be Facebook, it could be Instagram. But at the end of the day, these are very, very visual things. So you think about you. So anything where you have visual cues, I think, or like Pinterest even, right? So anything where you can touch, feel, look at it, and you want it, the journey of exploration starts. I don't want a $100 t-shirt, but sometimes I do buy a $100 t-shirt because it looks pretty good, right? And it's how you're telling that story. So that whole process of actually looking at creating a brand, creating an aspirational product, having the right creative, having the right copy, having a website that is more beautifully designed and people can actually look into it is quite important, right? A lot of people forget these things. And what we are aiming to be is a D2C brand. Creating a D2C brand, of course, takes a lot of effort, be it through development, be it through creative, be it through any process that we are going through right now. And that came quite late to me. I'm not a creative guy. I don't look at that kind of stuff. But what I have been able to do in the long term is being able to hire people who are quite a lot better than me in terms of creativity, in terms of ideation, and in terms of execution. And once we're able to do this, it's definitely, been able to level up, right? And it's one of those things that I always say, and I'll keep saying it again, leave your ego at the door when you're running your business. There's no use saying you're the big guns or big shot. Hire people who are better than you. When there's an opportunity to give people credit for things that they actually do better than you, make sure you do it because there's no other way to go about it. So that's what I would say.
Amazing. Yeah, check the ego at the door. I think that's great advice. I think kind of similar vein here, but one thing I always found quite valuable in life is humility. And I feel like the most successful, inspirational people always seem to be the ones that carry humility with them and make sure that that's kind of a pillar in their life. And I love that. I think that's quite undervalued. And I think it's great that you can see the value of, that checking the ego at the door, carrying humility as a founder and a leader in a business in order to be successful. I think that's quite powerful. Something that probably goes often amiss in the entrepreneurial world. But, if it's working for you and you figured it out, then more power to you.
Yeah, for sure. Look, at the end of the day, for me, like I told you, like I'd mentioned this earlier, I used to pick blueberries and now I'm running my own company and everything else and being able to afford some final luxury things in my life, which for me is flying business class. And I'm just lucky because of that. I've never been able to do that. And I always wondered as a kid, what it takes to fly business class. Even in my first 2-3 years of being an entrepreneur, I was never able to do it. But now I can, and I feel, holy hell, man, I can't even imagine that. You have to pinch yourself once in a while and be grateful for what you have.
That's amazing. That's so cool. I'm very happy for you that you finally get to live out like that dream. It is a good feeling to know I've made it, all that
Yeah,
hard work, all those
I appreciate
3-hour
it.
nights of sleep. I'd love to hear your perspective on this. We like to talk to people about, just growth opportunities and the way they show up. One thing I did want to hit on is what would you say are the growth opportunities you think e-commerce entrepreneurs often miss out on? What are people bypassing, do you think, in the industry?
It's an interesting choice, right? I mean, I think hiring the right employees, I keep going back to employees because I've actually overlooked this myself. So let me clarify this first by saying this. I am the worst hiring manager in the world. I want to be 100% honest with that. I am not a good hiring manager at all. However, having people hire for me, or like this person who I told you who I hired about 3 years ago, has helped me out a lot with that whole hiring process, right? So now I know that I've been able to build a better team because I thought I could do everything. So again, second thing, you are not the only person who will be able to do everything. You're not the person who is basically going to be like, look, I can do media buying and I can do customer service and I can do this and I want to save costs. That is not going to work. So an abundance mindset is more important than a scarcity mindset. It's not going to get you anywhere. And I've had the scarcity mindset of, oh my God, my employee costs this much, et cetera, et cetera. You need to look at the value that that employee is going to bring to your business, right? Another thing is, of course, when you talk about e-commerce, just e-commerce focused, right? Are people like, how much of a test budget? If you have $100, 100 is a piece of the pie. How much of that budget are you using to test? So for us, it's 80-20 split. So 80% of the budget we use in tried and tested methods, but 20%, we are okay losing that money. We always test out new opportunities and new things to do. We've lost some money on, doing live Instagrams with some famous influencers, people with 100, 200, 300,000 followers. And it's never worked out for us. But what it has helped us do is basically it helped us become a brand, which people love and they know the brand. Always be willing to take some risks. I mean, the reason you're an entrepreneur is because, there is risk involved in the whole process. So that's something that I would highly recommend.
When you started, you were saying something you learned about yourself early on was that you weren't a good hiring manager. I mean, I don't know if you'd be willing to share. Like, what does that mean? What did you learn about yourself that you realized I might not be the best person for this? Because I do think that's a golden nugget. Like, I think people could really learn from that. So I'm just curious what you found.
Yeah, sure. A couple of things I can tell you, right? It's like number one is I trusted people. There's no harm in trusting people. It's a good thing, right? But the thing is, I didn't have checks and balances in place to actually measure people's performance, right? So if a person comes to me and they said, have you done X, Y, Z? And the person's like, yeah, no problems. I am not a very detail-oriented person, right? And I would say, okay, I trust you, no problems. You're an adult. Let's go ahead and do this. However, I would find out later that they hadn't done it, and that would lead to a lot of issues, and I would never trust this person again, et cetera, et cetera. And I would just hire people without going through a proper hiring process. Like I would just hire people off of Upwork. I would just hire people off of like different platforms and not go through the whole hiring process properly. And that's what a lot of people end up doing now, right? They just go through that process and they think this is a good employee, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not. If you want a good employee, you should be willing to write that job description, not copy it from monster.com or one of those websites or, and say, okay, this is what I want. You need to write it. You need to see what this person is worth, and you need to spend at least a couple of months hiring the right employee. If the employee is urgent, then hire a contractor.
Yeah, I think that's powerful advice. A couple of things you said there. I mean, one, really just investing and making sure that you're setting up those expectations down to the job description. You can probably powerfully convert if you have the right job description by putting a little bit of time and effort into the process of hiring and most certainly training. But another thing you said that I really liked was you talking about there was no measurement to sort of track progress and if people were performing well. Like that's a huge one. I mean, that's something like, for example, we're working on right now in my own department. We're realizing that we're going to grow so much more as content creators if we have a performance scorecard applied to certain pieces of work. And that way, over time, you see, okay, I'm a little bit weak here. I'm a little bit better there. You start to shapeshift. And all of a sudden, everything's just really high caliber across the board. But if you don't have a checkpoint along the way, you just make the same mistakes. And even from a managerial perspective, it's too easy to not really understand who needs to improve in certain places if they all start kind of overlapping and crossing. So being able to put a process in place, ultimately, even though it seems time consuming, actually helps your end product down the road. I don't know if that's something you kind of implemented, but something that we found is working.
Yeah, 100%. And, Empire Flippers is a really good hiring process. I know that for a fact. I was talking to Justin and Joe about this quite a lot in detail. So, if there's something that you guys do right, is just the hiring process. I mean, another company that really did its hiring right was Zappos. Zappos took about 3 to 5 months to hire for one role,
Wow.
believe it or not. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's quite interesting, like how they went through the whole process.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I think they definitely have a good system. They have a really strong funnel when it comes to their candidates, and they take it seriously and they don't mess around. So it is good because, like you said, it ends up really impacting the business. You're switching gears, looking out a little bit more holistically. I was wondering, is there any advice that you wish you just had early on in your journey?
Always diversify in terms of platforms. Everybody like says they launch something, they're too focused on Facebook ads or they're too focused on Google ads. We got both accounts suspended, of course, at different times. But when that suspension happens, your world comes crashing down, right? So you need to be diversified off of Google, off of Amazon, off of Facebook. You need to find a different venue of how to actually generate traffic and sales, right? It could be that your Facebook feed gets suspended, then you can, use influencers. Your influencers get suspended, you can use Google. You can use Google if your Amazon account gets banned. So you need to be able to diversify your portfolio. And that those are the businesses we actually look to buy, is basically based on that metric. It's like, if something happens to one metric, can this business run by itself or not, or what exactly the issue is here?
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. I love hearing it from different entrepreneurs. It seems like no matter the monetization that they're working in online, it does come back to some shared pillars, and certainly diversification is one of them. You can't be relying on one mode of traffic or one type of product. Like, you got too much risk in the business if you're going that route. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's a good one. It's always kind of a tough question, but I'll ask it anyway. What do you think the future of e-commerce will look like? And how can e-commerce entrepreneurs best prepare for the future? Now, I say this is hard because no one has a crystal ball, but it's always worth it to get best guess.
Yeah, I can tell you what's going to come next. Next is going to be live shopping. I think people or influencers who present live shopping feeds, it's already happening in China in a big way. It happens in India or Thailand in a big way. People who are influencers, they'll come and they'll demonstrate the product to your live, so you can almost touch and feel it, feel how it is. And they'll be able to, it's a door-to-door salesman, but they'll be doing it on video. So you can be convinced if this product is worth buying or not. You can almost see what it's like. I think part of where this comes from is because people are ordering stuff online, but what they order is not what they end up receiving, right? And because of that, I think this is a good shoe-in to be able to fit this in. So I think that's something that people need to look into it. Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting one. Gosh, I don't know. Maybe I've been living under a rock for a while, but I'm like thinking about that. I'm like, do I not watch enough influencers? Like, I didn't know that was the direction that this is all going in, but
It will. I think
I
it
can see
definitely
it.
will. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's a cool one. Well, awesome. So, Ronnie, we normally wrap these up with just like a quick rapid fire section. So, how do you feel about kicking that off?
Sure. Let's go.
Okay, so first question. What's the key to scaling an e-commerce business successfully?
I have a little bit of money in the bank and to be able to have a single growth goal, right? It's like find a winning product and you should give a 110. So what I mean by that is if you find, for example, for us, when we started, we only had one hero product for watches and, everything was directed towards that. So we tested out all platforms. We made sure the quality was, of course, the product was high quality. The quality of the product, the customer service was, phenomenal. And that's how you scale a business.
Okay. So, what tools or resources can help online business entrepreneurs grow their business?
Yeah, I can mention a few. Of course, everybody knows the usual ones. You've got Shopify, you've got, diversification, what I talked about, Google, Facebook, Shopify, Amazon, etc., etc. Of course, I would say to get to the next level of growth is to hire right. I keep saying that again and again because you will find it quite hard to hire the right people for your business. I think it's quite important. And from day one, you should have checks and balances in place of how you're hiring and who you're hiring and to be able to measure, that engagement. So don't make the mistakes like I did, which I'm happy to admit to, but having that in place from day one would be important. And I think one of the things that most people end up overlooking is the expectations. It's expectations from you as an entrepreneur and it's the expectations you have of your employees. I think that it's quite important to have that set from the beginning.
Awesome advice. Okay, so final question here, and more of a personal one. What has been your funniest moment working as a digital entrepreneur?
Well, it would be my time with Greg, my good
Oh,
friend
gosh.
Gregory. Yeah, with
Oh, no.
Greg going in Ho Chi Minh City for all you can eat buffets, which also serves all you can drink beers. So that's called my
Oh, my
co-working day with
gosh.
Greg. Believe it or
I
not.
love it. Yeah, I'm feeling kind of jealous right now because I went to go to Vietnam for job training with Greg, obviously. And
Yeah.
I don't think I got taken to a buffet. I mean, yeah, I had some drinks now and then, but like I wanted to go to the buffet and I didn't get
Yeah, it
taken to
was
one. So what the hell?
all you can drink beers and co-work buffet with Gregory, the legend
Oh
himself.
my gosh.
Yeah, big shout
Well,
out to Greg.
he's
Miss you.
big shout out to him. Yeah. Yeah. Well, now I'm going to give him a hard time tomorrow. I'll be like, excuse me, like you've had more fun with other people. Like
Yeah,
job training,
where's
you
my
really
fun?
failed us. Yeah. Where's our
Exactly.
fun? Busy
100%.
training up for the job, I guess. But oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, I'm sure that was a good time. And I mean, I can't imagine what like a buffet in Saigon would be like, but it sounds awesome. So I'll add it to the bucket list.
Yeah, I highly recommend the one at Sofitel if it's still around. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Fun times.
Add it to the list. I love it. Ronnie, this has been great having you on. So cool to hear. Man, your journey just from start to finish has been so interesting. And I think this is going to resonate with a lot of people who may very well see themselves in a similar sort of path as you've been on. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your inspiration and so many nuggets of wisdom about what you've been able to do.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
Hey everyone, now that we wrapped up this episode and learned about the best tactics to scale an e-commerce portfolio, I wanted to cover a common question about buying and selling and running online businesses. So today's question is, how can I create an onboarding process for a team that sets a business up for success? So we did talk about this a little bit in the episode. I did want to cover some key points here. First and foremost, when you are creating an onboarding process and setting up your team for the future, you have to get your head in the game that this is going to be a time commitment up front. It's probably not something you're going to be able to do in less than a week when you're busy running other things if you really want things to continue to run smoothly. So have your head in that kind of place. It takes time. It takes commitment to get it right and set up a system, but ultimately that's going to reap dividends down the road. A couple things to make sure that system is working well. So make sure your KPIs, your key performance metrics, are crystal clear and connect all tasks back to goals that hit those KPIs. So by doing this, it gives clarity around why new hires are doing a task and serves as a motivator, as well as aligns all activity with the bottom line of the business. Another thing, and this one I think is personally really relevant, feedback is also key. You can't expect new hires to get everything right from day one. They need a framework for success, and that includes regular check-ins with the manager. Having one-on-one meetings each week between a manager and a direct will help ensure that there's regular feedback week to week, and also creating even a grading process to help show feedback and show progress to help track personal growth will be really helpful for new hires. So hopefully that answers your question and gives you a little bit of insight. That just about wraps up this week's episode. Thanks again for everyone for tuning in. Hopefully, you gained some valuable insight on the opportunities that digital acquisitions offer. Make sure to click the link in the description or visit empireflippers.com/marketplace to learn more about listings currently live on our platform. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a review and subscribe to this podcast for more great content that'll be released soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Opportunity Podcast. I'm looking forward to having you back next week to hear from your fellow entrepreneurs and online experts.